Hello guys and welcome back. It is Sunday. Hope you guys are having a fantastic weekend so far, and we have got a very special guest with us today. We have got the man himself, Cultivated Media Incorporated. How are you doing?
Hello, Purple. I am awesome today, and I'm debuting my current very low effort logo because I decided I should probably stop going on to other people's live streams with a picture of Freddy as my avatar because at some point somebody's going to get hit for copyright because Susan doesn't like us, and I think Susan still knows who I am or used to go by. And for anybody who doesn't know, I used to be Bulls Trek. I'm now a stick figure. I'll be CMI for short. That's me. Oh yes, and I apologize to live streamers that were wondering why my audio has been crap the last few streams I've done, because I found out even though I've been speaking into my Yeti mic for the past couple weeks, apparently the audio has been going through my Logitech webcam that I never use. Dan, Noel, everybody I've streamed with, sorry, dudes, that was I've become I guess I'm a boomer now. I'm old. Everything stopped working. CMI, is that TMI? It might be. I don't know.
I love that, and I absolutely love the stick figure. I've got to say, I think it suits you, especially with the happy face. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, except I'm known for not smiling a lot. I'm sure that comes as a shock because I've always been, such a happy, optimistic, glasses half full sort of chap. And Archer Cullen, stick figure goat. The goat.
Yes.
Well, I'll address this right now because people keep asking about the goat because the under my retired channel and identity, yes, the goat was a big thing. The goat may be getting a rebrand. He's lost his former professorship because he got canceled. So he's no longer Professor Dinkles. It may be disgraced former Professor Dinkles, or just Mr. Dinkles. He's going to discuss bad horror movies, so he may come back. I don't know. He's mad at me for retiring, so he hasn't talked to me in months. So we'll have to discuss it with him.
It's complicated.
Yeah, we've got he's an angry little goat. I've pissed him off, and well, you see, he hates me. So we're going to see what happens.
That's amazing. I love that. Speaking of horror, that is going to be our topic for today. But before we jump into it, because I know it's a genre that you have a deep love for, let me say hey to everybody. So we have got Archer Colin, who says, Dr. Dinkles, perhaps?
No, he's had his PhD revoked, so he can't be Dr. Dinkles either. He's really mad. We're going to do a documentary at some point, and we're going to cover the disgracing of Professor Dinkles. No, he's not allowed on his campus anymore because he had beliefs that the regular people didn't quite agree with. Well, regular people, I say, what constitutes regular people on university campuses. So he's in hiding right now. He can't find a job. The fact that he doesn't have arms kind of limits his ability to do things. He's thinking of being a gas attendant because he can lift up the gas nozzle with his teeth. But wow, I'm going really far into this, aren't I?
That's a more elaborate backstory than most current day TV shows get. It's incredible.
Yeah. So I'm going to stop talking about the goat. So that's where the goat is. He's disgraced. He's angry, and he's been defrocked.
So I think that answers the question. Archer Colin, great to see you. We've got Sadaku24, hello there. We've got Garbage, great to see you. We have got Zax, hello Zax, good afternoon. We've got Salty Texas C, and a big thank you to Salty, who has also sent us a super sticker. Let me see what it is, if I can get the thing to show up. Where is it? There isn't. There it is. It's popcorn. Thank you, Salty. Really appreciate that. Thank you so very much. We've got the lovely Leia Rose. Hello, honey. And we've got Emotionally Unstable Amphibian and Keely Cham. Great to see you. And Southern Cecil has had a name change. He's now Southern Cecil backwards Pornbot. Good to know. And Jacob Ironside. Hello. Great to see you guys. You guys are awesome. So, and Mr. Batsu. Hello there. Hey. Oh, one of the things I've noticed, because we've been following each other on Twitter for quite a long time, and you have always had this great love for horror, but not just, your general run-of-the-mill horror. You really, really go into the weeds with this as a genre. Has this been something that's always been with you? Is it something that you've always gravitated towards?
I've been a horror fan, I guess technically since I was 6 when I saw my first horror movie. For the longest time, it was kind of equal, half horror and half sci-fi. Although the sci-fi genre is well where it is now. So now it's mainly just horror. But I would say when I was 6, actually I was discussing this with Dan on Facebook. I think yesterday actually he ended up picking up the movie. But yeah, when I was 6. You remember the days of dark Disney? They put out this movie called The Watcher in the Woods, which actually I haven't watched, but then I've decided I don't want to watch it again, possibly because I don't think it would scare me as much at my current, much older age than it did at 6. And then the first actual horror movie I watched was Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3.
Great sequel.
Well, it was kind of funny too because I was 1987, so I may have been around 9. You can do the math and see how old I actually am. But it was funny because I was at my grandparents' house and they used to have pay TV, and my grandparents were very super religious and just typical that generation. And so they had pay TV. Like, me and my brother were being irritating as 5 and 9-year-olds can be. So they're like, okay, no, we're just gonna put something on the channel. I'm like, okay, there's something about some guy named Freddy. I don't care, just watch that. We're going to the other room. So unbeknownst to them, so it ended up being Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, which I guess by nostalgic means makes it my favorite movie. And I'm like, maybe this is when I became twisted. I'm like, I love this. This is awesome. I'm like, the vein scene, the puppet scene, the TV in the head scene. Even played
all the great
video.
Physical effects that they did. All the.
I think one of the greatest movies ever made. Second best Nightmare movie, but one of the best ever made. So that's when I became a horror addict. Then after that, it was I would kind of sneak things because when my parents, they the same thing. They'd always send us to the basement, watch your stuff there. So me and one of my buddies, so again we're like 9, 10, would rent horror movies from a video store right down the street. And in theory, they're supposed to card people. This guy didn't care. He's like, I'm like, it's like membership. It's like a library card. Obviously, we don't have a driver's license. But like, oh yeah, I know you're good for whatever. Like so. That's when I got into really obscure, terrible horror. And by terrible, I mean I love it. So there's a company out there, which I discovered a few years ago, called Vinegar Syndrome. Region 1 exclusive, although I think they actually sell pretty well in the UK as long as you've got a region-free player. But this company, they're actually really successful, and they're one of the only boutique labels that actually ships from within Canada. Scream Factory, Arrow, Shout Factory, all them. No, I had to pay a small fortune. So they ship from within Canada. So most of these titles, they've got a few major ones. Like they put out a really nice copy of Censor, the movie that came out last year. They're doing the 4K re-release of Amityville Horror and a few other major things. But for the most part, it's crap that you've never heard of, which is awesome. So every Black Friday, they do a 50% off sale. And so it's not bad, for a boutique label. You get them for like $13-15 even with the exchange
that's not
rate.
Bad. Yeah.
So I'll just this looks ridiculous. This looks even more ridiculous. So I'll spend 3, I think I spent $500 last year. Don't tell my bank account. Just just going there, I'm like, this looks terrible. So I'll watch them over the course of the year, and they're terrible. Like what was it that I watched? Blood Hook. It's about a fisherman with a hook. It's ridiculous. Some of these aren't even HD. They're shot
I've never heard of these.
Well, it's I like Cinema Snob's definition of these: shot on shitio. So basically, shot on standard def video. This is half of them. The transfers are awful, and I don't care. Let's see. I got the. I should name off some titles right here because I've actually got it down here. So, Dead Delilah, Blue Vengeance, Terror. That's a really interesting one. Shot. I don't remember that one. A Woman's Torment. House on Tombstone Hill, which was actually good. That's an anthology one. The Bees. It's ridiculous. Sex World, Bullet Syndrome. This is actually how they started. They actually started by releasing vintage porn and then eventually went into terrible horror.
Yes, it sounds similar to Full Moon Studios because they kind of veered off into that direction as well.
Oh, I love Full Moon. I've got some of theirs too.
Best known for Puppet Master, yeah.
Puppet Master. Well, there's also the recent Puppet Master series thing, which is probably one of the most ridiculous things I've seen in the past few years. Yeah. Has anybody seen Baby Oopsie?
I've heard of it. I haven't watched it.
It's nuts. Is it? In a fun way, kind of like how Terrifier, if you've ever seen that, is like it's cheesy, but it's awesome. If you haven't seen Terrifier, watch Terrifier. This trailer for the sequel just came out too. But anyways, rambling. So that's kind of how I got into it. So I love all movies. Like my DVD and Blu-ray collection takes up 2 rooms in my house. Somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 individual units.
Wow.
Most people when they come in, well, it's kind of all. It's not in my main room anymore. The place I used to live. It's my office. It's all shelves full of Blu-rays upstairs. It's the DVDs and TV on DVD and that kind of stuff. So I watch everything. Like I've got a section for romantic comedies. I've got a section for classic musicals. I've got another section for classic movies. I've got a section for terrible 90s and 2000s comedy, which is kind of what I grew up with when I had more hair. I've got a drama series. I've got a fairly sizable action series. I actually have a pretty decent British section. So yeah, I like everything. I don't watch regular TV. I don't even watch streaming that much anymore. It's mainly every night I watch something from my collection. So that's my. It's much better to live in the 80s and 90s, which you can do, and just pretend that now doesn't exist.
Yes. Well, a lot of people are saying that, they go back to what they grew up with, basically. So I think horror definitely had its peak in the 80s, with so many fantastic horror films back then. But even I've started going back and I've been watching the Universal horror, back from the 30s and 40s. Just absolutely incredible films. You don't realize how great those films are until you rewatch them.
And the amazing thing is, if you watch they've been remastered a couple times. They had cheap DVD, really not so much fixed up versions. When actually Van Helsing came out, they were a tie into that movie. But then about 5-6 years ago now, they put out the remasters for Blu-rays, which actually, if you've seen them, they look incredible. It's like it was shot last week just in black and white.
They do. They're crisp.
Been retransferred again for 4K. Oh, it's awesome. It's same thing with the Twilight Zone. It looks looks like it was last week.
See, that I haven't got in physical copy yet, but that's on my list. I really, really want to get the full collection of the Twilight Zone. And we had a question in the chat. Sadaku, I keep pronouncing your name wrong. I'm sorry, honey. It said, is Puppet Master the one with Donald Sutherland and the alien slugs that attach them, that possess people by attaching themselves to their backs? Puppet Master is a franchise, so it's literally these little stop motion animation puppets.
Yep.
There are the villains or heroes, depending on how far along the franchise you go. with them.
Yeah, although I know which one you're talking about, Sadako. It was it's not related in any way. The Puppet Masters, released a couple years ago on physical media by Kino Lorber, from 1994. I actually saw that one in the theaters way back in the day. But yeah, it's similar name to the point that I'm surprised they never really got sued. But no, it's a completely different standalone movie. Actually, well worth watching though. If you haven't seen it, I think it's still in print. But yeah, no,
Hmm.
it's more of like a mind control thing. No, the Puppet Masters, it's more of kind of a nutty puppet thing, and then you have whatever Baby Oopsie was supposed to be.
Yes, and then you've got is it Demonic Toys as well? That was kind of a spin-off, which was
Yeah,
weird. Yeah.
it's well, Baby Oopsie is a spin-off of Demonic Toys, which was a spin-off of they got a whole like this is like I'm sure half of Full Moon's revenue comes from this franchise.
Pretty much, yeah. The rest of it just comes from the weird stuff that they do.
Yep.
But I really like them as a company, I've got to admit, and they bring out some fantastic renditions of their films.
Yep.
They really do. I think they did like an amazing full set not long ago of all of the Puppet Master films.
And I missed out on that, and I've been looking for it. As far as I can tell, it's no longer available on the site. It's out of print. It's one of those things I have them. I have the older DVD collection, although it's DVD, not Blu-ray. The Full Moon full set. It's one of those, and I've burnt myself a few times by holding off on things. It's actually the third time I've burnt myself by holding off with something. But no, I'm like, I'll get it later. I'll get it later. Now I think it's out of print. It gets collector's prices. The other one was a Amityville Horror Collection, not the main three, but it was a set that looked like a house that Vinegar Syndrome put out a few years ago. Kept putting off. It went out of print. One of the icons was there was a Halloween set that Scream Factory put out back around 2014. I held off on that one. That's probably my biggest regret because I really wanted that set. Ended up getting like the crappy slim version with some extras missing. But yeah, I missed out on that. So it's yeah, I try not to think about that. So I just have at least I got it on DVD. It's yeah.
Yes, yeah. It's always something, I suppose, in the back of your mind to look for, but it is frustrating when there's just that one particular version of something that you wanted, you just can't get a hold of it. But
Yep.
I love that you are such a huge fan of physical media. In this kind of day and age where everybody wants to kind of stream everything, I just love being able to look up on the shelf and to see all of these films and own them.
Yeah, and that's the only way that you know for sure you can have it. Like I don't actually watch films on streaming. See, and here's where a lot of people are now regretting what they did. Like, okay, I'm just gonna, and I've inherited some entire DVD collections from people that decided I don't want this anymore. And some of them have actually, there's lots of duplicates, so I've held on to them. In some cases, I've actually given them back because they're like, well, yeah, no, I don't need this anymore. I can watch everything on streaming. Dude, you'll have like 6 streaming services. You want to watch that one movie you really want to watch. Chances are it's not going to be on that streaming service.
Yep.
And they found this. And not only that, if something's on a streaming service once, unless it's an exclusive, it's going to go away, which is why I will not get into non-exclusive television series on streaming because I've been burnt by that a few times. I've told this story a few times recently. But one of my favorite recent series was Bates Motel. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. It's awesome.
But I've heard good things.
Well, I'm mad at Amazon Prime because they picked it up for a year, and this is mainly what they seem to do. They license things just for a year, and they disappear. So I watched it all the way through for the first time a year ago. I'm like, this is awesome. So this summer, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to watch the whole thing front to back again. And Prime is really annoying because it actually keeps everything in your list, and you don't know it doesn't exist anymore until you click on it.
Yeah.
So I click on it, first episode. I'm like, this is no longer available in your area. Oh, Jesus. So I ended up ordering the set, which is out of print. So I had to, maybe temporarily, I don't know if it's coming back, but I got it from a marketplace seller. It cost me $150, but I'm like, I don't care. It's more than I would normally pay for anything. but it's become one of my favorite series. But yeah, no, don't rely on streaming. Even if it's an exclusive, chances are, remember the Netflix Marvel, and that was Netflix partially owned. Those are all gone now.
Yep,
So no,
that's
don't
gone.
sell your collection and your favorite movies. Keep a copy of them. Not only that, you're dealing with basically, without going into too specific details, current yearisms, which are causing things to be removed, things to be edited. So if you want your favorite movie unedited, physical media.
Yeah, and people don't even realize that the films have been edited until they sit down to watch them, and they think, this isn't what I remember. This isn't how these films played out. Or at the beginning of all of the films, you have that this has scenes and themes, that don't fit with today's ideology, or the disclaimer that they put in front of them.
Well, I noticed one recently. One of my I also have a section for cheesy movies that I loved as a kid. One of those is actually Adventures in Babysitting, partially because I did and still had a massive crush on Elizabeth Shue. But I have that on Blu-ray, which most of the Fox stuff has actually gone out of print. You can just get it because they were so overproduced. But there was a little thing. There's a term that's used basically for somebody of certain sexual identities, which we don't have a problem with that, but we're talking about 1987, so a certain term was used a couple times in the movie. I won't say it because Mama Susan will make us go away, and it's not a term that I advocate on any level. It is derogatory, but for the time, it was a term that was kind of in common use, and I was around then. It was, didn't even necessarily mean back then what it does now. But the problem is they re-edited it many years later, or I think it was they took a cut that was made for television. So they replaced that one word with something completely ridiculous, like he's a dork or something. So even little things like that, and people are watching it. I'm like, well, yeah, that's yeah. Here's the thing, and this is the argument I've always made: you have to look at things in the historical context you were made.
Yeah, context is key. Yes,
I'm old. I was around in the '80s. It was a very different time. So these movies, represent that time. Most normal people would not advocate certain terms being used now. But you lose the whole historical context of the film when you edit them. And that's just. And if you watch I went and just checked out the Disney Plus version, and it's so random, and it's just so like it distracts more than probably the original word would. But I've got the original Fox Blu-ray from I think around 2009. It's an older release. So I've got that. Like I said, I don't advocate the term, but just leave them as they are.
Yes,
there are things that are done today that we'll be looking down on in 20 years.
Big thank you to the chat. You guys have been throwing out guesses without actually saying the word, so thank you guys. I appreciate that. Sarag says, I must say I was shocked to rewatch Weird Science and how often the term was used. It was. As you say,
actually,
but
it was.
Yeah, as CMI says, it was all in context. And hello to Dempsey, great to see you, and Manam Nefron, great to see you, and Vic Rattlehead, great to see you guys. Come rolling in. So you said that you're a fan of just all kind of types of horror.
Yep.
Do you have like any particular that you've watched and you've just thought that this is absolute trash, I will never watch this again? Or will you give anything a go at least once?
Sadly, it's current stuff.
Okay.
Now horror, it's gone through several transformations. Actually, 3 of the major trends in 3 different decades were actually started by Wes Craven. He tried starting a 4th in the 2000s with Cursed, but that movie was just a disaster. There have been some horrible movies that I've seen in the past couple of years that they won't be in my collection. They'll never be watched again. The Black Christmas 2018, 2019 was just an abomination. It's current yearisms. The Craft was awful. There are some Netflix films that are just unwatchable. So most of what I won't watch again is really in current year. Um, I'm sure there's some stuff that I've watched 30 years ago that never got a physical release that maybe I won't watch again. I don't know. But it's mainly ideology is what turns me off. I'm sure that comes as no surprise. But also they're badly written, and unfortunately, we're now in what I would call kind of another dark age of horror, which there have been before, although this one's a little bit different. Usually it's because a trend has been going on too long, like the slasher and teen slasher movies of the really starting in the 70s, going to the 80s. And
once they started getting self-aware, I think once Scream started and it started parodying itself, that's when it kind of killed off that particular trope.
Yep.
And then it moved on to things like the shaky cam horror movies, which I hate.
Or the found footage?
Found footage, yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of people make fun of me for that. That's one of my favorite film genres. Yeah, I know. I think it's because I saw Blair Witch in the theater in '99, and I thought this is one of the most original things I did. But no, I do have a full shelf of found footage. But no, I can understand why people hate it. I'm like, I love the Paranormal Activity series, even the terrible first or the terrible last one. But I could see why people hate it. Like I've always admitted, like I love the Resident Evil movies. I refuse to watch the current series, but I
like the Resident Evil movies. I thought Mila Jovovich was fantastic in them, and I like the concept of a lot of these found footage. But again, they just kind of took them to the extreme, and you just get sequel after sequel after sequel. But with the Blair Witch, I can really respect what they first did, especially the marketing behind it, because that was genius.
Well, I remember the before it came out. I think it was MTV, and this was back when I think it was on MTV when they actually would play music. But they actually did a documentary, which was available, I think, later on the DVD and later on the Blu-ray. Which it was done documentary style to make this seem like it was real. They told the actors just keep a low profile. So to kind of create the mystique around it, because we hadn't really seen anything like this before, unless you reference Cannibal Holocaust, which is a delightful movie from a little.
Somebody mentioned that in chat. Before. Yes.
But with Cannibal Holocaust, they did such a good job of marketing and hiding the actors that I believe was the director ended up being arrested. And I think he was actually briefly charged with murder.
He did, yeah.
Until the actors came out. So,
I guess proof that the actors were still alive by bringing them out.
That's a classic story.
And then he had to explain how the death scenes were actually done, and some of them were ingenious. The way that they got them, the impaling scene. He basically had the actress sit on what was a bicycle seat and then hold the stick in her knife. It looked incredibly effective, but for something that was so simple.
Yep. And that's what, and anybody can now, if you want to see a really bad found footage, there's the world of, we all know about Tubi. There's some really bad stuff on Tubi. So there's you got the mainstream found footage, and then Tubi, they'll put anything on. And most of their stuff is not even direct to video, just I have a camera and I feel like filming something. So, and there's actually a lot of paired, like they've got a Conjuring Universe ripoff series. They've got the Insidious Universe ripoff series, several of them. They've tried to rip off found footage. It's actually worth checking some of these out because they're awful. So you can have found footage. I'm like, I'm not a director. I'm terrible. I could take my phone. I'm cheap, so I still have a Samsung S9 and take my phone film. Here you go. Here's my found footage. Oh, look, it's a ghost. It's a sheet. Oh, yeah, the sheet's scary. Yeah. So it's found footage. When it's done badly, it's still watchable because it's just bad. So I maybe I'm I don't know. I may be a masochist. I have no idea, but I love watching bad movies, genuinely bad. It's a fascination to me. I'm a weird sort.
So I remember back in the day when sci-fi was still sci-fi, not sci-fi, and they used to have just all of these terrible horror sci-fi films on at like 3 o'clock in the morning,
Yep.
and that's what I used to watch a lot of them.
Well, that's why I love Vinegar Syndrome, because I have recognized watching some of these movies previously. Um, and it's you have to actually give them respect for what they do. They actually, it's almost like it's the criterion of bad movies, because they actually do go in and they restore these movies to the best they can. Some of them, the source material is literally a VHS tape, so they clean it up as best as they can. But no, that's what these are. And I will pick up one of these random films. I'm like, I'm going to watch this now. I remember watching this in Canada. We had it used to be called Space the Imagination Station. Now I think it's called CTV Sci-Fi or something. I haven't watched it in years, but yeah, no, it's the same thing. In the middle of the night, they play these terrible movies, and I watch it like, well, 20, 30 years ago, I've seen this before. Awesome. I don't know who other than me would actually buy this. I'm sure some people would. That's why they have small runs of usually about 3,000 units, although most of them actually sell out. So there's at least 3,000 people like me that just love watching crap.
There's at least 3,000 people that love to watch terrible movies. It's good to know that you're not on your own. I do like terrible movies, I've got to admit, especially in horror, because you can usually find something to grab your attention, whereas with things like action movies or romance movies, they tend to get played out. But with horror, there's usually either it's the villain, or it's some really bad cheesy effect, or it's the dialogue, or it's something that grabs your attention whilst you're watching.
Yeah, and Phonebox Chicken, you're in your comments mentioned Ghost Adventures. Ah, yes, Ghost Adventures. I actually used to watch that show religiously. But it's very hard to take Zach Bagans seriously. I don't know, Purple, have you ever watched this show?
I haven't. I've heard of it, but I've never watched it.
Early on, it's okay, but it's, I don't know. I haven't watched. It's been about 5 years. I after like 100 episodes of, oh, it's a noise. Okay, that's the entire thing. The entire episode consists of you walking around this place in the dark, and you heard a noise. I'm like, yeah, I have bad pipes in my house. I hear noises all the time. You heard a pipe, and an entire episode would be based off that. And it was over and over. They had some episodes like, okay, this place is haunted. We didn't find anything. Well, then why did you do an episode? It's like clanging. But their early episodes were actually, they went to these, like, I do believe in, to a certain extent, in hauntings. I think there's stuff out there that we don't understand. And some of their early episodes were actually really good. And their original movie was decent. And they caught some really creepy stuff. But it eventually became as, okay, this house is haunted. Okay, we heard a noise. So an entire...
Sounds like they were kind of phoning it in. Yeah.
They're desperate. But Zach... did he do a music video recently? He's got a very specific way of talking. And you can tell he's trying to act. He actually he has a museum. I think it's in New Orleans, where he's got like murder artifacts and things like that. But yeah, just over the years, I can't take Zach seriously anymore.
It's kind of funny you talked about what was scary when you were kids. And did you see on Twitter recently what was trending, that weird Australian show for kids that was it was called Round the Twist, that had the scarecrow, and this thing kind of blew up and people said, oh my god, I thought I imagined this thing. It's kind of weird what your subconscious kind of buries, or what you find frightening.
Have you ever to look that up?
Yeah, it's a really good show. I remember it because it was shown in the UK, but it's Australian based, and it was supposed to be for kids, but it had this kind of weird sort of horror twist. But yeah, it blew up on Twitter recently, and I had a bit of a flashback about it. It's like, oh my god, I forgot this thing actually existed. But it is weird as you kind of grow what you find frightening, I suppose. For me, I've never found horror as a genre to be scary. I've never watched a horror film and not been able to go to bed, after it. But some people, they will say, you know, the most frightening thing they've ever seen is something like The Exorcist, for example, because it was so real, because it was, at the time, it was set kind of like modern times, whereas everything that had gone before it was, you know, Frankenstein, it was Dracula, it was stuff removed from modern day.
I find, yeah, it's more like I watch a lot of true crime. I find, you know, things that have happened in the real life and some of the horrific things that people do to each other. I find that stuff really disturbs me because, well, some of it because it's not a movie. But some horror, in, you know, you can still watch it, you know, it can create a sense of tension. Some genres within horror are better for that than others. Like in the 2000s, we had, I guess, what is now known as the torture porn genre,
Yes.
with, you know, Saw being the best example.
Hostel, yeah.
Yeah, Hostel, Green Inferno, a few other films in that. And so that one, it's not really terrifying. It's more, it grosses you out. That's the point of those. So it's not really scary, but I know a lot of people can't watch that because, you know, you just groan and think, well, how's this? What would it be like if this stuff actually happened? Then you have, you know, the shock jump scare horror, which will work for, and yes, found footage is notorious for this. Where often it's, you know, it's a misdirected scare, you know, that will get a jump out of you. And you know, I've got my surround sound system, you know, it's you know, after I bought a house and finally moved out of the apartment, I was able to set up this massive system with my sub. So yes, they do make me jump now for a second, but then you get irritated. I'm like, oh, okay, a friend just jumped out of the forest. I'm like, no, just but Insidious, especially the first Insidious movie, actually did have jump scares that were genuinely creepy because they're part of the story and they're just off in the corner of the screen. And then you've got the CGI fest, and the best example of this is The Haunting, the remake, the 99 disaster, which I enjoy because it's like a time capsule of 1999. Yeah, things like that. But The Haunting is a good example of the genre of horror that I think works best. When you look at the original 1963 Haunting, the black and white film, that's the type of horror that works best for me, where it's not in your face. It's the atmosphere that's created. I think it's the things that you don't see, which is actually why I think the first Blair Witch was so effective, because you don't really see what's going on.
Yes, it's all implied. Yeah.
Yep. That's why I love the Amityville Horror. A lot of people hate that movie because I'm like, nothing happens. I'm like, that's not the point. The whole movie is the atmosphere. Another one, which I think is the best example of creating an atmosphere, and probably not only one of my all-time favorite horror movies, but one of my favorite movies of all time, which is Dario Argento's Suspiria.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Very thin on plot. The whole movie is about literally creating the atmosphere of a nightmare. And and you know, this movie is over 40 years old. I think 40, my math is bad, 45 years old now. So it creates an atmosphere of horror. And if you look at it, it's a very, very thin story. There's not much plot going on there. The whole movie is about atmosphere. It's about that goblin soundtrack. It scares the living crap out of you. And also, it's one of the remakes that I think actually worked, which I put off watching it for 2 years because how can you remake this movie? It's, you know.
Yeah, see, I've never seen the remake because I only know the original, and I didn't want. Is it worth it? Okay, I'll give it a go.
What they did, and I can't remember the director's name now off the top of my head, but what he did was the exact opposite of what Argento did. Whereas the 77 version, it's very colorful. That's what it's known for, like, you know, blood red. Yep. What he did was the movie is almost black and white. Very, very low color palette, which actually creates an entirely different atmosphere.
Yes.
The first one was very thin on script. What they did with the new movie is they actually fleshed it out. The movie's over 2 hours long. So they took the thin script and turned it into actually a very rich story based on the same themes, which work really well. Tilda Swinton actually plays 3 completely different characters in this. I won't tell you which ones they are, but I didn't even realize until I was over. I'm like, it was actually her. I'm like, holy crap! And you probably won't be able
is
to
it a
tell.
remake or is it an homage to the original film? Would you say in that case? Because it seems like they've changed it just enough so it's not a technical remake, which I've got to admit I'm not a fan of.
In this case, it's almost not either.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's definitely not a remake, because the choices are, and another difference that was very obvious is, you know, the blatant theme of the original, you know, Goblin's very creepy soundtrack.
Yes.
This one has a very low soundtrack, more traditional horror, but in many cases it doesn't have much of a soundtrack at all. So this is one of those rare things where I'd say it's not really a remake because it's so completely different and literally makes opposite choices from the original movie. And it has one of the most WTF endings I've ever seen. I'm not going to ruin it for you. And it has Mia Goth in it, who was in X recently. That's where I discovered her.
I'm gonna have to watch this film now.
Well, here's the what's her name? The girl in 50 Shades of Grey, the worst trilogy of excrement ever made.
Oh God, yeah, I know, yeah.
Okay, it's you know, I got to pull up the name because I know the name. It's just whenever I think of something. Okay, 50 Shades of.
While you do that, let me say a big thank you and hello to Vic Rollhead. Great to see you. He sends us 100 rupees. Thank you so much, honey. He says,
Cool.
Round the Twist was amazing. I was up at midnight watching it when I was a kid. An Indian channel had it. Nice. I remember it, and I think Keely Chow said it was on Fox Kids, and that's what I used to watch it as well. Absolutely. And Salty Texas brought up a really good one as well. Hitchcock. Absolutely. Horror of Hitchcock. So good.
Yep. Psycho, and actually the sequels, the non-Hitchcock, definitely homage movies are in there. And oh yeah, so Salty Tech, yeah, Dakota Johnson. I don't know why that was so.
Got it. Thank you.
Here's the thing: I didn't even look at the actors. Like I picked up the Blu-ray. I'm like, I'm not even going to read anything about this. And I didn't even realize until halfway through the movie that it was her. I'm like, because you see the scenes from that terrible smut movie or the trilogy, and it's obviously the acting is terrible. Then you watch her in this, and then halfway through, I'm like, okay, I know who this is. Who is this? And I look it up. I'm like, it's the 50 Shades of Grey. Oh, God damn it! Like literally, I didn't notice until it was halfway through.
All right, I'm gonna have to see this film now. Like I said, I remember the original, and because I don't want the original tarnished in my mind, I didn't want to watch this kind of remake. But
I put it off for 2 years.
Yeah, you've sold me on it now.
And you'll know what I say when I say most WTF ending of all time possible.
Oh yes, so much so. Hello to Matt Part.
Oh, hey,
Great
Matt.
to see you. Hello there. We've talked briefly about remakes. Do you think that remakes work? Because you mentioned Wes Craven. Now, Wes Craven was notorious for remaking a lot of his older films. You know, he kind of redid them in the 90s. Some of them work, some of them not so much. Hills Have Eyes was probably one of the ones that I felt worked pretty well.
Yeah, and they went off in a completely different direction when they did the sequel.
Yeah.
That's a problem with every genre now, but with horror. I would rather not see a remake because more often than not, it doesn't end up being Suspiria. It ends up being 99's The Haunting. You'll have remakes which are not really remakes; they're continuations. Recent Candyman is an example. I think they went a little too overboard with the politics in that one, but I still think it was a decent film. You have something like another movie which is god awful, The Craft, which I love the original film.
I love the original. That. Yeah, I refuse to watch the remake because of it.
I did. It's both a reboot and a continuation. It's awful.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of CGI disasters of remakes of movies from the 80s and on, which I could do without. You can have older remakes like the 1977 Invasion of the Body Snatchers as an idea. It was a
Mm-hmm.
remake, but it was brilliant. Um, you've had several remakes of Henry James's Turn of the Screw, or almost a retelling. You had two in 1 year. You had a really bad movie with one of the kids from Stranger Things and the tall lady from the Terminator films, and I can't remember what the name was, but it was not the
bad.
best. Then the same year, you have The Haunting of Bly Manor, which was okay, but not as good as The Haunting of Hill House, and not as good as the other remake that I'm forgetting his name now too. That Midnight Mass, which was absolutely brilliant, but
That was good, actually. I was surprised with that. Yeah, it went in a direction that I didn't see coming, and I thought it was pretty refreshing.
I thought I was the same thing. I went expecting like, okay, this is actually going to be terrible. I was kind of let down by Bly Manor, and I know the director's name, and this is what happens. I think I've got early Alzheimer's because I just forget things when I do live stream.
Stream brain, that's what we call it.
But no, he's the same director that redid Stephen King movie that I'm now forgetting. No, Doctor Sleep.
I like Dr. Sleep, and that was another one that surprised me as well. Yeah. I used to be a huge Stephen King fan, back in the day.
It's well, his films are hit or miss. Oh yeah, another example, Sadako 24. Thank you for bringing up that Abomination.
Terrible. Absolutely.
I didn't mind the last two. They're not great, but I didn't mind Texas Chainsaw, and I kind of liked what they did with Leatherface. They're average horror movies, but they're not great. But that Netflix thing that came out earlier this year, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Even if it comes out on physical media, I will not be buying this. I will not be watching it again. It's everything that can go wrong with the remake. You mix in current year with very bad direction, terrible storytelling,
and terrible actors
that make no sense. Yeah, some of the worst acting I've seen in years.
So bad.
It's Netflix. Their horror movies are awful.
I've got the same thing now with the Halloween franchise. Now, I know we've got the third and final one coming, but with the second one that I watched, I don't care. I just want Mike Myers to actually wipe out Haddonfield. Just take them all out. Just finish the job. Because I hate the direction they've taken this in. And the fact that they had the nerve to basically erase all of the previous films except the original Halloween and then sandwich these two together.
The first one, the 2018 one, I was surprised because I thought it was going to be terrible because they were actually marketing it as a quote current year thing. I actually did a video on it like 4 years ago, which it ended up not being that. It ended up being decent, but then Halloween Kills. But Halloween, the problem, I love the franchise, but it's the most confusing timeline of any franchise I've, because there's, I think, 5 different timelines. You've got the original. Okay, so you got in one time frame. I think you got the first Halloween up to Halloween 5. Then I think it goes off on a slight tangent for Halloween. I haven't watched Halloween 6 since it came out, and then H2O, which was okay, and Resurrection, which was a disaster. So slight skew off into another thing. You've got Halloween 3, which is kind of its own thing. You got the Rob Zombie movies. The first one I like. The second one is crap.
I like the first.
Which are their own things. And then you've got... So it's confusing if you want to watch Halloween 1 and Halloween 2, which take place literally right after the other, like the same night. So anybody wants to get into this, I'm like, okay, I'll watch the Halloween 1 and 2. Okay, but then you got a remake that takes place right after the first of this basically 2-part extended film, but it cuts off the second part, takes up where the first part left off, and in terms of choices, the Halloween franchise just confuses me. I love the films, but it confuses me.
I was always more of a Nightmare on Elm Street fan, I've got to admit, but I'm not looking forward to this third one. No. After seeing the previous ones. Zach says a question, says, any George Romero love?
Yes, Day of the Dead is one of the best films ever made in the horror genre. I actually, or not Day of the Dead. Well, yes, Day of the Dead's decent too. I'm thinking Dawn of the Dead also.
Dawn of the Dead, yes.
Dawn of the Dead and the remake. Even some of his lesser known films, The Crazies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I'll he's one of the greats. I'll rank him up there. I know some of the movies he just kept. There were, I don't know how many sequels to the Dawn of the Dead series there were by the end. Uh, but yeah, they did kind of trail off a little bit. But in terms of the stuff that he's done, there's even that I can't remember the name of it. The that witch movie he did in the '70s. Why is the name not coming to me? It's Alzheimer's again.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I can't remember what it was, but I like it. You know, his direction. I've got to admit, and I think he's right up there with the greats with what he's created. I was always more of a Wes Craven fan. I've got to admit, but yeah. And Borg says I'm a fan of Friday the 13th. Jason Voorhees had the most kills.
Yes. And that is actually one of the nicest sets I have in my collection as well. But Friday the 13th, we're not going to talk about the recent remake, just like we don't talk about the recent abortion that was the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, which, yes, I will never watch that again. So, yes, there are movies that bad remakes. I know Friday the 13th, next to Nightmare on Elm Street, it was my second horror franchise growing up. And actually, the first movie came out on 4K this week, and for some reason, Amazon hasn't shipped it. But yeah, so well, you've got the big three. You got Friday the 13th, you've got A Nightmare on Elm Street, and you've got Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has their favorite of the three. Halloween was actually, I didn't watch Halloween until I was, I think, a teenager. The other two, Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, I discovered as a kid. But it's Halloween 6, which I believe was 1995. Which was the first Halloween movie that I've watched, and I haven't watched it since, even though I own it in the Slim collection. But yeah, I don't have the same attachment to the Halloween series I have to the other ones because it just doesn't have that nostalgia factor behind it.
It would probably rank third, but Dempsey says Freddy versus Jason versus Ash was a great comic book series. It is. I've got that, and it came this close to being made into a film as well, which I would have loved to have seen. But I did love Freddy versus Jason. It's one of my guilty pleasures.
It's the problem with the versus movies is everybody remembers Freddy versus Jason, which it spent 10 years in development hell. It was supposed to come out I think 93 is when it was originally supposed to come out, and then it got pushed off all the way to 2003, I think it was.
Yeah.
That one was okay. I don't rank it as one of the better movies, but it was an interesting crossover. The problem is you have the side characters that just kind of took away. I'm like, no, just give me 2 hours of Jason and Freddy beating the crap out of each other. That's what I want to see. But then you have Alien versus Predator, which is not good. Then you have the one after that, which is, yes, on the list of things I will never watch again. So I'm very trepidatious when, something gets so hyped up, like Freddy versus Jason was hyped up for a decade. I don't think it really lived up to the hype. It's okay. So that's why these event movies, the Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, it's either going to be brilliant or it's going to be a disaster if it was ever made into a film. And there's no in between with these.
It'll never get made now because the actors are just too old. But I think back in the day, they probably could have gotten away with it had they done it immediately after Freddy versus Jason. But I just was happy to see Robert Englund back as Freddy.
Well, I think with a body double, I think he could still do Freddy. He's in his 70s now, I believe.
He's in his mid-70s, yeah.
But I think you'd have to use a body double for some of those scenes. But with the makeup and with close-ups, I think he could still play Freddy. That's another thing that I'd be interested to see, but I'd be trepidatious again because it could turn out to be like a Captain Picard, and see the difference in performances there, which I don't want to go into. But because of the makeup, because I think he still has the voice.
Yeah, he does.
It was mostly in the voice, so you'd have to hide it with body makeup, with the makeup, but you'd need a body double, just because a 70-year-old is not going to move the same way. That's I think he was in his late 30s, I think, when he
Yeah.
did the first one.
The thing with Robert Englund, he's got a very specific way of moving, especially when he plays Freddy. He kind of prowls. He's got that kind of stalk. So you'd really need someone to study how he moves to get it down. Max says, Purple Valkyrie, what do you think of Phantasm? I love Phantasm. Phantasm's a fantastic movie. Always wanted one of the props.
I've never seen it after I have the first two, which are the only ones I've ever seen. Screen Factory put out the second one. It's long out of print, but I actually at Walmart for $25. A 5 series set was put out. So actually, I have it on my shelf right here. I picked it up about a month ago. I'm actually going to be doing a marathon of those throughout Halloween. So I'm finally going to watch the entire series.
That's actually a really good question. Do you have any specific films that you watch every time Halloween rolls around every year? Is there any that you just absolutely have to sit down and rewatch?
Yep. So the first Halloween, which is I think a tradition for everyone. A lot of people might not agree with me on this, but the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. I love that film. That's in rotation every year. Last House on the Left, and
yes,
both
the original or the remake.
The original. Although the remake is not terrible, but I go with the original. So there's those. Nightmare on Elm Street. Oddly, I watched that in the spring. I mean, that's when I first watched it, so I think it always reminds me of the spring. So there's some that are interchangeable.
I would add Trick or Treat to that because I love that. That's such a good anthology. Yeah.
Trick or Treat, Creep Show 1 and 2. I tend to watch during Halloween. I'm sure that I've missed a few, but there's The Burning, Sleepaway Camp are always in there. Sleepaway, the first one. The second ones are entertaining, but they're not great. So yeah, those in Halloween, because I don't watch regular TV and I don't watch a lot of streaming through Halloween, it's a tradition where I watch 2 movies every night, because that's my TV time so I hang out with my puppy and we'll watch 2 movies. And it's always I watch one that I've seen before, and then I'll watch something that I haven't seen before.
I love that. Dempsey says Event Horizon is my greatest of all time horror movie.
Brilliant.
Barely beating The Thing, Nightmare 1, Halloween 1, Phantasm 2, and Friday the 13th Part 1. Great film.
And I've never understood the hate for that film either. And I think this is what I was going into earlier, why a lot of people hate it, for the same reason they hate the original Amityville. Because it's not like what you'll have now, where it's like jump scares, sci-fi fest. No, what makes that movie absolutely brilliant is the atmosphere it creates.
Yes.
Because it's the mood. That's my favorite genre of horror. And that's why it gets hated on. That's why the critics dumped all over it when it first came out, 25 years ago now. I think it's brilliant. I think it's on my list of one of the best movies ever made. And the recent 4K Steelbook is worth picking up because I love the new transfer of the film.
Yes, the airlock scene. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I need to rewatch that. It's been a couple of years since I watched Event Horizon, but it is a fantastic film. And Sentient Dildo, when it first came out, it was trashed, if I remember correctly. People hated it.
People dumped all over it.
Yeah.
And I went to see it in the theaters. I'm like, no, this looks brilliant. Even then, a quarter century ago when I first saw it, walking out of the theater, because I even went into it. I think I'd read one review before going in, and it was like, it's crap. And then I watched it, I'm like, no, this is actually really good. But I didn't really know how much it was actually hated, just hated, until maybe a decade later when I started looking into it. I'm like, why do so many people hate this movie? And then it's now called classic, but it's one of these where it's one side or the other. Either you love it like I do, which I think it's one of the best films ever made, or you think it's one of the worst things ever released to the screen. There is no in between on that film. So if you hate it, no, you're allowed to. I will humbly disagree. And
I think it's a great film, and just going by the chat, it seems like everybody else really likes it. But I think it's one of those that people forget, or they think it's a sci-fi film rather than a horror film. But I would class it more as a kind of cosmic horror almost. It's
yep,
Lovecraftian.
they think it. I think the problem is they think it's going to be aliens or
Yes.
Alien, and it's not even close.
Alien, I always think of it. It's kind of it's a haunted house film in space. So
Yeah.
it's that's the vibe that they're going. Although I absolutely love the film, I always preferred Aliens.
Yep.
If I was going to go between the two of them, but
That
yeah,
was one of my introductions to horror too. But yeah, Aliens. Right after it came out, it's actually probably around the same time of the Nightmare on Elm Street 3 fiasco of my grandparents. I snuck in a copy of Aliens, and me and my buddy watched it hiding in the basement. And yeah, so
yeah,
that was
that was me with Terminator 2. Yeah.
Oh no, Terminator 2, I actually got into the theater. Me and my same friend who used to sneak horror movies. No, we went with his mom. So they let us in, and I was 21. I was, again, you could do the math. I was 13, or I just turned 13. So and from what I remember, I don't even think technically we were allowed, but they let us in. And I remember, yeah, Terminator 2. For anybody who isn't old like me, you have no idea how much that blew everyone's minds when it came out,
Yeah.
because we'd never seen anything like it. But no, I saw that in the theater. And that's one of those movies that I watch every year, even though every physical media transfer since DVD has been god awful. I just try and pick the least terrible of the 4 recent transfers. I'll watch that.
It really does make a massive difference in how good the transfer is with a film. It can make or break watching
Terminator
a good
2 is
film.
cursed. It is cursed. Since the dawn of Blu-ray, this movie has been transferred 4 times. The first one is it was an early Blu-ray, but it's one of the worst looking Blu-rays I've ever seen. Then they put out the Skynet edition, which got repackaged several times. That one was DNR'd to hell to the point that they look like wax statues. Then eventually around 2015, there was a Japanese transfer that was eventually released in North America, and I think other regions too, UK, Australia, which is the least terrible of the original 3, but there's artifacting. There's still DNR. It's bad. So then they announced it. So for the 4th time, it's coming out on 4K, and James Cameron is supervising this. The movie was out for a month before it was the first 4K to go into bargain bins, and I'm just amazed how they screwed this up a 4th time. And it may be okay. DNR is something like 4K movie fans. We're collectors. We want the authentic experience. Once again, they DNR'd it to hell. Somehow it's a 4K with artifacting. The scenes don't go together. The color timing is all over the place. There are some scenes that are actually out of focus. There's the occasional scene that will look brilliant, and then it looks like you're watching a VHS tape next. It is the worst transfer, 4K transfer. Probably one of the biggest disappointments that we've ever seen. And the fact that James Cameron himself apparently supervised and approved this pile of shit. Sorry, I didn't want to say naughty words on your channel because I want to get you in trouble.
That's fine. It's good.
But no, 4 times they've screwed it up. The only decent transfer of the Terminator goes back to the DVD, but the best transfer, the least problem-ridden, is a 1993 Laserdisc release, which actually looks better than every release that's come after it, including the 4K. So no, we will. So it's.
Remember Laserdiscs? I remember Laserdiscs.
Well, that's what all the cool people had. So Cameron ruined it on purpose? I don't know. Maybe, well, there's reasons why the Odysee and True Lies has never been released on Blu-ray or 4K, and it goes into what happened to this Terminator 2 abomination. There were Blu-ray transfers of both those films made 15 years ago, and they couldn't be released because James Cameron had to watch them and approve them. He never got around to watching them. They have both since been retransferred again for 4K, and I think this was like 2018, so like 4 years ago. Same thing. So you got 4K transfers of both films sitting on a shelf, and James Cameron just can't be bothered because he's busy with his 15 Avatar sequels to just sit
That
down
nobody
and
asked
approve
for.
these
Yes.
transfers, and yet he approves Terminator 2. So that's one of my pet peeves. So if you're wondering why those two films haven't had a physical media release in over 20 years, that's why.
Remember that when you go sit down and watch Avatar. Yes.
Yes, that's why we don't have those on 4K. They're ready. There's videos on YouTube about this. They're sitting there, and they're like, James, we'll pay you. Just watch these two films so we can put them out. He won't.
I just won't do it. I didn't know that story. I love that. It's like he's doing it out of spite now.
Well, he has a reputation of being a bit of a jerk. So
Yes, I've
he's not a
heard
nice man.
interviews. Yeah, it's a bit, yeah, a little bit out there, I think.
Yep.
And Dempsey's got a good question. He says, do you all put The Crow into the horror genre? I love The Crow, the film, the comic book. It's one of my absolute favourites. Watch it every year. That, again, will be in rotation for October. But I don't know whether I would class it as straight up horror. I always class it more as a love story.
Yeah.
But I suppose it's got horror elements to it.
It's got a kind of a horror sensibility. That's actually one that oddly enough, I haven't watched in years, and that's one that to this day I still haven't upgraded from DVD. But yeah, it's I think it's been maybe 10 years since I've seen it. But yeah, I would rank it more. It's got a horror atmosphere to it, but I think it's also one of those films it's like the original The Omen. It's a cursed film because we all know what happened during filming. Somebody lost their life, Brandon Lee.
Yes.
So it's always kind of had sort of that atmosphere around it. So it's one of those where watching it, it's like you can't, whenever you see Brandon come up on screen, and the scene where he lost his life is still in the movie.
It is, yeah.
So
people think it's the end scene, but it's actually part way through where he's talking to Funboy.
Yeah.
No, is it Funboy? I think I can't remember.
Well, that one, that fact always for that specific movie weirds me out. And The Omen is considered the most cursed movie ever made. There are documentaries about what went on during that film. You actually have to see it to believe it. That's what I write. Everybody just go watch YouTube videos on the making of The Omen. Because everything that happened during that film, which is everything you could possibly think of, actually did happen.
Yes. That was a weird film. A great film, but it's almost like the behind the scenes is actually more interesting than the film itself.
Yep. And then you watch the film and you know what went on behind it. Well, it's like the Twilight Zone movie that came out with what was the name? Jennifer Jason Leigh's dad.
Yes.
Morrow. The actual, so for anybody that doesn't know, he was filming his portion of the Twilight scene. They're doing it was supposed to be in Vietnam. I think maybe in Florida or somewhere they were filming. The video's actually on YouTube. If you go frame by frame, him and a kid he was carrying ended up getting decapitated. So it's actually really morbid to the point that I've only watched it once because his segment and that one scene where he ends up losing his life, and you could see it's creepy as hell on YouTube. That's one of those films where just watching it just creeped me out to the point that I can't ever watch it again. So but there are cursed horror movies. I'm like the Conjuring 2 is apparently cursed as well, and there's a few other things. But yeah, it's I find cursed horror movies, just the concept, kind of fascinating.
Yes, I that's a genre that I need to kind of delve into because, as you say, there are some really fascinating kind of behind the scenes stories about the making of these films, and you wonder some of them, especially The Omen, how it actually got made in the first place because of so many things went wrong before and after.
There's a movie, Session 9, which was filmed in an abandoned hospital. I think, was it Amherst? It was one of the famous abandoned hospitals. But apparently that one and some of the occurrences that happen on screen actually end up in the movie. It's actually one of the first films to be shot digitally. It was either 2000 or 2001. But I know the making of that one is pretty interesting as well. Apparently, like the director was actually traumatized by the end of it. So there's a lot of stories like that out there. So it's like, maybe in some cases, or it's like which was the Mel Gibson Jesus movie.
Oh, Passion of the Christ.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where Jim Caviezel or whatever his name is actually got struck by lightning doing the crucifixion scene. So there's definitely something else out there. There are enough stories. Actually, no. Apparently, he got stuck not once. Apparently, he got struck twice. So we know that there's something going on out there.
Yes. Wasn't The Exorcist kind of plagued with problems as well, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, The Exorcist. So was Poltergeist. The first one is actually the both daughters in that film, or the actresses, both died tragically. One of them not long was killed by her abusive boyfriend. I think maybe less than a year after it came out. And then, of course, the younger girl right after Poltergeist 3, I think she was like 9 or 10, also passed away. And apparently there's like additional things that went on during filming it. So it's like there's these collection of just legendary cursed films where so many bad things happen surrounding them that, maybe you made somebody mad you shouldn't.
Yes, they did. There was always that story with Poltergeist that they did actually use real corpses in the scene, and they didn't tell the cast. Now, whether or not that's true, I'm not sure, but that's what I always heard.
I've heard it. I think it's been debunked. I think, but don't quote me on that. But yeah, considering I wouldn't put it past them. I don't know. Maybe they got lazy, but yeah, that's not a nice thing to do.
No, not at all. Oh my gosh. Oh god. I'm going to start to wind down, but would you be interested in doing this again sometime? Because I would love to continue to talk horror.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, no, I'm sort of back into this. Is my YouTube presence now as the stick figure, but yeah, it's
so cute.
I'm sort of now like I don't like my channel is retired until it finally gets rebranded, which I've been saying for a year now, but to become a all horror channel, that may happen this Christmas if I finally get the time, because it's going to take me a while. These videos are going to be documentary type, so I have to actually have the time to do it. But what I do now is I guest stream as the stick figure under my new name under multiple channels. But yeah, no, actually this was awesome. I'd love to do this again.
Yeah, I would, especially throughout October, I'd love to get a rundown of some of the films you've been watching and recommendations. That would be amazing.
Actually, yeah, we could do that. Well, yeah, just let me know. It's like I'm always up for this. I this live streaming thing, there's no pressure, and talking about things that I actually like. Nobody's heard me do that in like 6 years. So it's like, rather than talking about, that British show I used to watch, which shall remain nameless.
Yes, the show that shall not be named, indeed. Yes.
So no, I like talking about, things that I enjoy and making fun of certain elements, but it's, this is awesome.
It does make a huge difference, doesn't it? Getting to actually talk about something that you enjoy rather than rage about stuff. I've noticed that, and a lot of people have said that they're kind of moving away from that side of YouTube, and they want to watch things that people enjoy or recommend or get enthusiastic about. So thank you so much. And I want to say a huge thank you to Zax as well. Great to see you, Zax. He says, great show. Thank you. Well, thank you guys. You guys are amazing. We had some brilliant comments in the chat today. Some really knowledgeable people about horror films. So thank you. And Dempsey was legend with Tom Cruise and Tim Curry considered a horror film. Only Tom Cruise is acting. The rest of it, I would say it's fantasy.
Yeah. I've seen it once, and only once. It may be on my list of things that I'm not in a hurry to see again.
Tim Curry's amazing in it. He looks fantastic, with all the prosthetics. But I think it was, if not Tom Cruise's first big acting gig, then one of the first. And
I think Tim Curry, I think Rocky Horror Picture Show or Home Alone 2.
Those were his best roles, would you say?
The 19 his Pennywise interpretation of
Of course.
the TV movie. Well, that too. So yeah, but no, Legend, no.
No, I actually really like the Pennywise. I thought it was great, but the one that and we watched recently was The Stand. You know, the original Stand miniseries, and that has aged incredibly well.
Oh, it's yeah. I watched it earlier this year. Then they had the remake. I think I got an episode into it, and some of the actors who were involved, who shall remain nameless, but there's more than one. But one who may like pooping on beds.
Yep.
Best example. I couldn't watch it. I'm turning this off. No, I gave it a try, but yeah, one episode in. But no, the 1994, again, I'm old, but I watched those the week they aired. I remember taping them. I remember watching them probably 5 or 6 times over the next year. Like, absolutely brilliant.
It was and it was so refreshing to be able to go back and watch it and realize that this was a great show with a fantastic cast. Thoroughly enjoyed getting to rewatch it. And Carla says, CMI, you need a stick puppy too.
Yeah, well, this is the laziest logo in the history of laziest logos. I just needed something. I don't even know what the font is. It's actually no. This is the height of my artwork.
I stand by it. I think it's fantastic. But then I might be biased. Oh my gosh. CMI, thank you so much for doing this. This was a fantastic talk, and it's a genre that I absolutely love getting to talk about. So getting to chat with someone as knowledgeable as you, it's been a real treat. Thank you so much.
I try to know things. Sometimes I know things good, sometimes not. But yeah, it's I talk about things and stuff and things and. Words fail. Yeah, it's that kind of day.
Words are hard.
Yeah.
But you were fantastic. Great to get to chat with you. And Darren Bradley, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Great to see you guys. You guys are awesome. Before we wrap up and let people get on with their weekend, what have you got coming up? Because I know you said you've got a rebranding in the future, but have you got anything closer coming up?
Well, if you want to follow me, so mainly my presence is on, my Twitter account. Don't go to that old account because it's locked and closed and we will never speak of that again. But I'm at whore_fan1978. I also recently rebranded my Instagram account that I've never used, but I put up a picture of my puppy. I think that's Cultivated Media too. Lately... Oh, my puppy's making noise. Perfect timing.
Nice guy.
Okay, but it's I lately, actually, the past few weeks, it may become a regular thing. I've been on Facebook's channel with Dan.
Dan, great guys.
So we've been early my time. It's 9 a.m., but I've done that for the past few weeks, and it's probably going to become a regular thing where we just we go for about 2 hours just talking about news, and then we have a separate stream which is published later in the week where we talk about physical media. So that's what I do now. I will do everything except talk about that show which shall remain nameless that I never want to watch or see again.
It's a dead show.
Doing that. We don't even mention it by name anymore. So I will talk about anything but that. That's what I got. And for September, the channel will finally be rebranded as Cultivated Media. I may keep up some of the videos under that old name with the yellow text, just, for nostalgia's sake. But to hear me yelling at things that I used to yell at, I've learned that life is too short to watch things that I hate and then scream at them. But yeah, and the goat may come back. Like I said, he's been disgraced, but the goat may be the one that looks at bad horror, so bad they're good horror movies. Maybe we'll have to see. He's very mad right now.
I love that, and I can't wait to have you back because we have missed you. But I was really, really happy to see you back on Twitter. And as I said, I think we were talking before we went live. It's so good to see the puppy pictures.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely love
there's
it.
more. There's more coming. It's she'll be. She's about to turn 6. We're almost done the teething, so we're at almost to the point where she's going to stop chewing on everything, including Dad. So we're counting down the days until that comes.
It's so cute. Guys, let me say once more a huge, huge thank you to Cultivated Media Incorporated. Been wanting to do this for quite a while, so thank you so much for taking the time.
Awesome. Well, thank you. This was a good time. I actually really enjoyed this, and I just want to say thank you to everybody that showed up to listen to me ramble on, sometimes coherently for an hour.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Thank you to everybody who was in the chat. Thank you to everybody who sent super chats, who sent super stickers. You guys are amazing. I will be back tomorrow. We're going to be talking good fantasy and bad fantasy, TV shows, and why is one failing and why is the other one not failing. We will be back on Wednesday with more woo-woo. I think we're talking vampires. And we'll also be back on Tuesday as well, Tuesday night on Salty Texas Seas channel. So lots of content coming up next week. But huge, huge thank you to everybody who joined today. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend. And we will see you again very, very soon. And take care, guys.